mountains had always been a place of silence, but that morning the silence was different. It was heavy, as if the wind itself was holding its breath. The lonely cabin stood against the backdrop of endless pine forests, its rough, hewn walls weathered by years of storms. Inside, Caleb Wren, once a soldier, now a recluse, was stirring his coffee when he heard a faint creak above his head, the sound of rope under strain. He stepped outside, his rifle in hand, and froze. Hanging upside down from the edge of his porch roof was a young blonde woman, her hair swaying in the cold breeze, her wrists bound, and a crude piece of leather branded into her torn blouse. The burned letters were jagged and black: Apache Lover. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the power of stories that change hearts, please take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Kindness Corner. Your support helps keep these stories alive. Caleb's first thought was that someone wanted this woman dead, not quickly, but with a message that would outlive her. In the wild stretches of New Mexico territory, branding a woman with such words was more than cruelty, it was a death sentence. The tension between settlers and the Apache had been boiling for years, and anyone accused of sympathy toward the tribe was cast out, often hunted. Caleb knew this too well. He'd seen it happen when he was young, when his own sister had been accused of helping an Apache boy escape a lynching. She never made it back home. The woman's skin was pale from hanging too long, and the blood had rushed to her head. Caleb cut her down, catching her before she hit the ground. She was light as a breath, and when he carried her inside, her lips barely moved. Her eyes fluttered open just enough for him to see the glassy blue behind them. She smelled faintly of smoke, leather, and fear. As the hours passed, Caleb worked to bring her back, wrapping her in blankets, giving her water drop by drop. She woke fully by nightfall, but the look she gave him wasn't one of gratitude. It was caution. She had the gaze of someone who'd been chased for so long she no longer trusted stillness. Caleb didn't press her with questions. Instead, he made stew and set it in front of her, letting the warmth of the fire and the quiet of the cabin speak for him. Days turned into weeks, and little by little, fragments of her story began to emerge. Not through words, but through the way she would stiffen when she heard riders in the distance, or the way she would sit by the window at dusk, watching the tree line with clenched fists. She had been the daughter of a railroad foreman, raised in a town where the Apaches were called savages and treated like ghosts that stole cattle and children. But while others saw enemies, she saw people. She had once nursed a wounded Apache boy back to health in secret, giving him food and water until he could return to his people. That act had gone unnoticed for years, until someone found out. The branding had come from her own townsfolk. They had accused her of betraying her kind, of siding with the enemy. She had been tied, beaten, and dragged into the mountains as a warning to others. Her hanging from Caleb's roof was no accident. It was a cruel message meant for him as well. He had once served in the army units tasked with dealing with the Apache, but he had left in disgust after seeing the bloodshed. Those who wanted her dead also wanted to remind him that his past could still be used against him. Caleb knew keeping her was dangerous. Word would spread. Men would come, not to ask questions, but to kill. And yet each day he found himself more certain that he could not send her away. There was something unspoken between them, a shared understanding of what it meant to be marked by the cruelty of others. When the snow began to fall, the trouble came. 3 riders appeared on the trail, their coats dusted white, their rifles gleaming. They called out Caleb's name, demanding he hand her over. The woman stood behind the door, her fists trembling, her breath shallow. Caleb told her to run out the back and follow the creek until she reached the old mine, but she shook her head. She wasn't going to run again. The confrontation was quick and sharp. Caleb's rifle roared in the thin mountain air, sending the riders scattering, but one shot grazed his side. The woman, in an act that would forever be seared into his memory, dragged him inside and barred the door. She tore strips from her own clothing to bind his wound, her hands steady even as her voice broke. For hours, they waited for the sound of hoofbeats to fade into the distance. By spring, the world outside the cabin had shifted. The riders never returned, perhaps thinking Caleb had moved on or that the mountains had claimed them both. The woman stayed, helping him repair the roof, tend to the goats, and plant the small garden out back. The scar on her shoulder where the brand had burned deep never fully faded, but neither did her resolve. She began to smile again, sometimes even laugh. Caleb realized something in those months, that loneliness was not just about the absence of people, but the absence of someone who truly saw you. They had both been outcasts, both marked by the cruelty of a world quick to judge. Together, they found something they had both thought lost forever: peace. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe to Kindness Corner. Every click helps us share more stories of courage, kindness, and second chances. And before you go, I have a special request. Tell me in the comments, have you ever stood by someone when the world turned against them? Your story might inspire someone else to do the same.